Washington, D.C. area. I'm doing interviews during this time of COVID-19 quarantining and needing some support and advice. And so I am interviewing my expert colleagues and friends who have good information and wisdom to help support others at this time. And today I'm delighted to have Elahe Mehrel with us, who's going to be speaking to parenting. She has been teaching parenting skills at workshops in public schools for the past 17 years. Elahe is based in Miami. And I met Elahe, we met at Hedy Schleifer's 3-year masterclass in encounter-centered couples therapy, where I had the benefit of really getting to ask Elahe for lots of advice at that time because my kids were still in the house. And now my 21-year-old is back from college because of the crisis that we're in. So I'm still asking Elahe for parenting advice. Elahe, welcome.
Thank you, Nancy. It is an honor to be invited by you, and I'm looking forward to having this conversation with you and coming up with some of our own experiences, some of them very embarrassing experiences as an expert of mothering, all the mistakes I've made. I would be happy to share with you and the skills, and hopefully this first one we will cover the basics and we will go into all the little skills and ways of getting very deep into how to get to know ourselves during this time.
Yes, I will probably have time to do that. So I like the framing of this. This is really the first of many. And in this first interview, I think it'd be great help to people to, the basics. What's most essential for parents to know right now?
Well, one way is, we're going to put our money where our mouth is to really go deep into our heart and start this conversation with each other and invite anybody who's watching to do this with us. To just take a breath, become aware of this oxygen that's going into our lungs, and just exhale, becoming aware of this moment. And as we're doing this, think of a thing or two, a person or two that we're grateful for. What are we grateful for this moment right now? And now that we've gone there, I want us all to think of a person or a being that has always, that's where we go in times of trouble, in our own mind right now, to go to that person that gives us comfort, safety, we know we're loved. Think of a gesture that we would like to get from that person. And do that, give that to yourself. Mine is this. And as I do that to myself, my body is feeling that. My nervous system is saying, ah. It doesn't matter if we give it to ourselves or that being or that person is present. So having said that, I was making a point that with all the knowledge that each one of us have, if we show up with our children dysregulated, angry, anxious, that's the energy that we put in. And we all know that our children read us. They read our face and our energy long before they could speak our language. So it's important that we clean that and clear that, become aware of it before we have an interaction with them. And so there are there are 4 principles that I usually teach because it's universal. It covers all ages, all numbers of children, all the places in the world, and I will go over them when we start.
Great. Well, let's begin. It was a great start to conjure up and really enter a felt state of having that Mother Mary that the Beatles would sing about, when Mother Mary comes to me in times of trouble. And for some people who don't necessarily have that experience of this being or person where they got the experience of comfort and care, how would you advise them to?
Advise them. That's why I said a being. We can invent that being. It could be a dolphin with wings. It could be whatever you want it to be. It could be light. But we have that. We have that at our brain, at our fingertips. We can just imagine and conjure that up. And if we haven't done that, I invite you to do that today. Conjure up a sensation, a being that can give that to you. Because if we can't do that, we cannot show up with our children. And if we can do that, we can also share that with our children so they can self-regulate, breathing and inviting that. So the principles, number 1 is actually the space. And the space being sacred, that a relationship does not live in me or you, but in the space in between. This is by Martin Buber, 1940s philosopher from Germany, Jewish. And he termed this point I and thou, which means if I look at you, Nancy, as a soul that I've had the honor of entering my life, and my relationship with you is based on that, looking at you as a soul, looking at my children as a soul that have come to my world, and it's my honor to raise them. The space can get really clear. But if I pollute it by objectifying my relationships, by looking at my children as an opportunity to feed my pride and be ashamed of what they look like or what they dress or what they said and how much they've achieved, then I've objectified them at that moment. And at the moment of objectification, I have entered pollution in that space. And so this is really principle number 1, becoming aware of the space. Number 2 is when either one of us, either our children or ourselves, we have a bewildering behavior, to look at it as a cry for help. What does that mean? That if I become reactive, or they start having a huge problem about eating something I've put on the table, or not wanting to go to sleep, or being rude, or holding on to their game hours after they were not supposed to. And that anger and that reactivity that comes up with me, rather than doing what I usually do, which start blaming myself or them, to go to this place and say, how old am I right now? What's going on with me? Which brings us to principle number 3, which is our biography is in every step that we take. If we're not conscious of it, we keep repeating the same issues and have fights over the same things and have no idea because we want to control the situation. And we have no control. The more we try to get our children to do the right thing, the more pollution we make. So the good news is if we look into ourselves and find out when we made those decisions to become this way, what happened to us, then the good news is that the tool is in our own hands, that we can figure it out, clear up the space between us and the young version of us who made a decision at some time to be afraid of something. And by doing that, we actually get to principle number 4, which every conflict can be an opportunity for growth. That every conflict between us and our children, if we look at it this way, see where it came from, what we can do about it, how can we clear that up, then we can show up healing, not healed completely, healing, one point at a time. And as a result of that, our children do not have to put up with a 7-year-old scared version of us every time.
First of all, thank you for bringing us through these 4 principles. And it's very much about using this time to look at ourselves and take the opportunity to reflect on what is showing up on my screen. As Thomas Hübl, one of my teachers, would say, how is your bewildering behavior showing up on my screen, and what is it triggering in me that's old?
Wow.
Can you take us through an example? So how has this come up for you? Grab an example. We had discussed the piano example, and to maybe go through these, how you actually go through these principles as steps.
Well, let me use that piano example because it's safe, because there are so many examples of even, my life where if I say what happened between me and my daughter or me and my son, I haven't gotten their permission. But this one was one that my kids, like every kid, when they see a piano, they say, oh, we'd love to learn the piano. So here we were, got this beautiful piano, got a very expensive teacher that was coming and giving them homework. Very soon, she turned them off, and they didn't practice and they didn't show up. And it became a source of not joy, but really pain in our family, because I became the enemy, and constantly, have you practiced? But what if you don't? Look, you asked for it. And that was when I asked myself, what's the big deal about this? This isn't about me and my son and piano. It's about something else. And when I did this process, I remembered, and when I was younger, exactly around that age, 5, 6 years old, I wanted to play the piano. Older, I had a lot of older brothers and sisters, and asked a sibling to go do this for me, asked a brother to buy this. And my brother gave this wise opinion that children say things like that. We're not going to buy a piano for her. Let her go to classes for a year and practice, and then only then does she deserve one. And of course, no one was around to take me to piano classes, and this stayed with me. And it stayed with me in a very unhealthy way, because I started saying, how dare he do this and not allow my father, who was very generous, to do this, to buy a piano for me. So I felt injustice by a male. My father was open-minded, and my brother had studied in America. Still, there was that, I believed it was the chauvinistic part, like, why should we do that? So my story about this piano was so much bigger than just my kids not practicing something, because I had been very open-minded about everything else. And knowing that actually was so healing. And I did write a letter, one not to send and one to send to that brother. And I created some healing about that. And I told my kids, hey, I know you said you wanted to play. You don't have to. This is a beautiful thing in life, music, whenever you're ready. And I'm happy to report that my son at age 15 started teaching himself classical music, and he's a musician. He loves it, but just for himself. He's not a concert pianist. That's not what I wanted. I wanted joy for him.
Thank you so much for giving us some guidance on how to use these 4 principles to creating a safer, more loving, more nourishing space, just like you started with, to feel this, whether we have to generate it ourselves or find someone to do it with us, so that our children can feel this and feel this, because that's what will help them grow into healthy parents.
Yes, Nan, for inviting me for doing this. And my last word is something that I wanted to share in the middle of all this. I forgot. As a homework for all of us to go back and ask our children, no matter what age they are, something I learned from the 5 languages of love, to ask our children, how do you know that I love you? And to be able to just kind of find out what is their language of love, because that's very, very important. Something I learned pretty late, because I wanted to give them what I wanted.
Right.
It took me a long time before I learned what they wanted was something different. They're really different individuals.
We'll end with that. What are the 5 languages of love?
Love are words. Some people just love words of affirmations. The other one is acts of service, like bringing breakfast to bed, fixing your car. The third one is touch. The fourth one is quality time.
Quality time.
And the 5th one is gifts, whether gifts that you buy or you make or you create.
I think that's so essential, to be able to ask children, how do they feel loved?
Yeah.
We're not projecting what we need and how we need to feel loved onto them. Well, thank you, my friend. Looking forward to meeting again. And take care of yourself. Enjoy the dolphins outside your window. I'll just moved to a new beautiful space where there are dolphins and manatees outside the window. So, to be continued.
To be continued. Thank you.
Thank you.